UFC Vegas 31, aka UFC Fight Night, Makhachev versus Moisés. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video by yours truly here at Boxingmmapicks. He goes by the name of Zan, I go by the name of Harris, and as usual, we are giving you our fight-by-fight breakdown specifically from the betting perspective, letting you know which fights are worth the odds, which fights you want to be avoiding, and perhaps an underdog pick or two. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you might even get a little bit of parlay action. If you have not watched our prelim video, make sure you press pause on this one. Go ahead and check that one out and come back to this and then press play. Let's get sort of right into it. We have 5 fights on this main card. We talked about the prelims already. We're going to get into the main card fight number 1. Gabriel Benítez taking on Billy Quarantillo. I'm going to start with this breakdown here first, and starting with Gabriel Benítez. You know, he had a good win in his last fight versus Justin James. That was back in December. Southpaw on the feet, pretty quick jab, decent lateral movement, has a sneaky one too. The hands are pretty sharp in general, mixes his strikes up really well. That back leg is a dangerous weapon for him. You know, really hard calf kicks with that back leg. He'll throw at different levels with that back leg as well. We saw how effective that was versus Justin James. Pretty solid striking defense too. You know, he covers up well. He has good head movement. Definitely has that pop in his hands. He's a pretty diverse striker. Makes use of strikes to the body as well. And you always have to pay attention when an MMA fighter does that very actively. Doesn't really seem to have that extra gear, especially when he's facing pressure from his opponent. And that's going to be interesting in this fight because Billy Quarantillo, maybe not necessarily a pressure fighter, but definitely somebody who, you know, likes to put the pressure on, likes to push a high pace. He did lose in his last fight. That was also in December. That was versus Gavin Tucker. And he was riding an 8-fight win streak prior to that fight. So definitely he's going to be looking to get back to his winning ways. A pretty serviceable MMA stand-up. You know, like I said, pushes that high pace throughout the entire fight. Throws a lot into his strikes, both punches and his kicks. Likes that front kick to the body, uses it pretty actively. And again, he likes to make it a pretty scrappy fight. So I do want to see how Gabriel Benítez handles that. He does like the game on the ground, though. You know, good grappling when he's on top. Good wrestling, has that body lock trip to land takedowns. Good ground and pound. A lot of submission attempts in his game as well. Doesn't really have the best takedown defense, though. He's almost willing to pull guard in situations and work off of his back. He has a black belt, so I will give him credit for that. He's pretty active off of his back, with those elbows, submission attempts as well, triangles, arm bars, things like that. We didn't really see that in the Gavin Tucker fight, but I have seen that in some of his previous fights. And ultimately, when I look at Billy Quarantillo, his path to victory here is going to be making use of that clinch, trying to bring the game to the ground. On paper, Gabriel Benítez has a pretty decent takedown defense at 70%. So he can potentially stop that from happening. And Benítez will definitely, or at least in my opinion, have the better stand-up. I think the pace that Quarantillo pushes, it might actually work in Benítez's favor here with the striking advantages that Benítez has, being a pretty good counterpuncher. Quarantillo, tough guy, but, I don't really see him putting rounds together per se. I think Gabriel Benítez is possibly going to pull this one out. Minus 190 is a little steep, but Gabriel Benítez is still going to be my pick.
Yeah, that's fair, man. You know what, though? There's some good things going for Quarantillo in this fight. One thing I like about Quarantillo in this fight is he has a pace. He has a pressure style, and I don't think Benítez likes that. But Benítez is a well-rounded striker, so he can deal with it. But I'm sure Benítez wants space, and Quarantillo is a guy that is on you all fight, right? So that's one thing going for him. And he also has heart. This guy has so much heart, and his cardio is crazy good. So if this gets into the second, third round, or even into the third round, Quarantillo, he has a serious gas tank. But when you really break down these fighters, though, Benítez is just technically the better striker, and I think most of the fight's going to be striking. I think Quarantillo definitely can get this fight to the mat. But when you look at the guys that beat Gabriel Benítez, Omar Morales, Sodik, Yusuf, Barzola, Fili, Leonardo Morales. These are different type of fighters than Quarantillo, than what Quarantillo brings to the ring. Quarantillo wants to tire you out. He wants to beat you, and he wants to get you into the deep end. He wants to get you into the third round, and he wants to beat you up. Like he wants you're out of energy, and he's full of energy, and he's still going, right? Just like you saw in that fight. And I think this could be similar to that fight we saw with Pereira versus Nico Price, where Pereira was clearly the better striker. But as the fight went on, Nico Price was able to, who had a bit better cardio, was able to pile on a lot of offense. I can see that happening here. So I'm going to go with Gabriel Benítez here, winning the first 2 rounds. I can see him having a hard time in the 3rd round, but I think he will survive. Because I think at that point, Billy's gonna turn it up, but I think it's gonna be too late, just like with Nico Price. So I'm gonna go Gabriel Benítez to win this fight.
Yeah, not mad at that comparison whatsoever. I can definitely see that going in a similar fashion as well. Let's move on to fight number 2, Rodolfo Vieira taking on Dustin Stoltzfus. How do you feel about this one?
And I think this is one of the harder fights too. When you really look at what he did in his last fight, the Brazilian ace, he's a super champion, Rodolfo Vieira. He has many championships in jiu-jitsu, and he got submitted by a purple belt, right? So he gassed out, and now he's fighting a guy, Dustin Stoltzfus, who has decent jiu-jitsu, not on the level of Vieira, but he has the better stand-up, and he definitely has better cardio than Vieira. So the question is, did Vieira fix his cardio issues to go longer? Now, the one thing about Vieira is he's been in those jiu-jitsu competitions, and he's done grappling for like 10 minutes. He's done 15 minutes of grappling. So I'm not sure why he gassed out so much that day when he lost to Anthony Hernandez, because he's been in long grappling matches. I'm going to go with Vieira, because one thing for sure is he's going to get this fight to the mat. Even though it's kind of a first round or bust type of thing, I think he has a really big chance of finishing him off in the first round. I think there's levels to the grappling. And I think there's a chance that he fixed a bit of that cardio. And I don't think this fight's going to have that same pace as his fight versus Anthony Hernandez. I think he can conserve his cardio a bit more. So I'm going to go with Vieira. It's a hard pick because we've seen him gas out his last fight and kind of give up. But I just think that he's going to turn it around. He's going to fix a couple of his errors there, win the first 2 rounds and survive the 3rd. So he might even get a submission likely, right? So Vieira is my pick.
I'm going to make this really short on my end. I mean, we know that Vieira has that one way to win via his grappling. So, you typically want to look at his opponent's ability to defend takedowns and grappling. And to your point, Stoltzfus, a little bit more credentialed than what Anthony Hernandez was. And Anthony Hernandez was able to defend it. That's the weird part about that fight for somebody who's nicknamed the Black Belt Hunter, to have a purple belt handle his own and then eventually submit him again. It's just really interesting. And again, like I said, I'll keep this short. This doesn't really have much analysis to it at all, but I can't trust betting on a favorite that performed the way he did in his last fight. That was just too odd to me. I don't know if that's a red flag, or I don't know if that was just a one-off, but I just can't pick a favorite based on that performance. So based on that alone, I'm going Dustin Stoltzfus. I'm not betting this fight whatsoever. I'm just curious in the pick at this point. So Dustin Stoltzfus is going to be my pick on that one. Let's move on to fight number 3. In that case, Jeremy Stephens taking on Mateusz Gamrot. This is a very interesting fight here. We see Mateusz Gamrot at -220 as the favorite. He beat Scott Holtzman back in April, not too long ago. Pretty good technical striker. He looks pretty composed and comfortable on the feet. Fluid movement, switch stance, diverse striker, mixes it up really well. Shows good level changes on the feet as well. He has really good in and out movement, good fakes and feints, really keeps his opponents guessing. And I mean, the reason why he can pull that off is because, of course, he does have that takedown ability, good takedown entries, good finishing ability with his takedowns, good chain wrestling opportunities as well. He is a Polish and European grappling champion as well. So just to legitimize that overall ground game of his, when I look at Mateusz Gamrot, I mean, 18-1, very well-rounded fighter is what I see from him. And I'm not surprised that he is the favorite here, but he is taking on Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens is always going to be a tough opponent, veteran there. We see his record 28-18. He's actually winless in his last 5 fights. And he did last fight over a year ago. That was a loss to Calvin Kattar via KO TKO back in May 2020. Pretty good kickboxer, showed really good moments early in that Calvin Kattar fight in the stand-up. He actually outstruck him in a lot of ways until the last 30 seconds of that first round where Calvin Kattar hurt him. That changed the pace of the entire fight. He has shown pretty good timing, good speed, good striking defense, really good calf kick. We saw what that did to Melendez. He was doing the same thing to Calvin Kattar, puts a good pressure, puts on a good pace, and again, puts that pressure on his opponent. Like I said, he is a dangerous opponent for anyone, in this division, in this lightweight division, especially for as long as the fight stays on the feet and every round starts on the feet. So he is always going to present some danger from that perspective. We know Gamrot's path to victory, or one of his paths to victory, I should say, is going to be the ground game advantages that he has. That said, Jeremy Stephens has 65% takedown defense. That's not unstoppable, but that's also not clueless on the ground. So let's see how that fares in this fight. My pick ultimately is going to be Mateusz Gamrot. I do believe that he can handle that pressure and that pace that Stephens likes to put on. I think he'll show a pace himself with the wrestling and the grappling advantages that he has. And I think he's obviously not the more experienced fighter, but I do feel he's the better overall fighter. So I'm going to go with Mateusz Gamrot.
Yeah, I'm echoing that pick. I'm going Gamrot as well. He's a very well-rounded guy. He can obviously utilize the grappling in this fight, but he can also hang in the striking. And this is at lightweight, so Stephens is moving up, I believe, from featherweight to lightweight. Yeah, so I like Gamrot here to get this to the mat here, utilize the grappling. And I think you can also hurt him on the feet. I just think he's more well-rounded here, the better fighter. So, and you got to remember, Stephens is 35. So I'm going to go Mateusz Gamrot to get this done.
Sounds good. That makes sense to me. Co-main event, Marion Reneau taking on the return of Miesha Tate. Let's start with Marion Reneau. She's on a 4-fight losing streak. She hasn't won since February 2018. That was versus Sarah McMahon, a name that we haven't really heard in a little while. Decent kickboxing, decent movement, decent use of the jab. She fights from the outside. She is hittable on the feet, especially when you put combos together. She has this kind of flinching motion that she makes in the stand-up. It makes her timing really easy to catch. She does have a bit of a clinch game, bit of a ground game as well. I do like her knees in the clinch, has that ability to stay close when it comes to those clinch situations. Decent takedowns as well when needed. She is one of those fighters that can do a little bit of everything. She's pretty tough, willing to engage as well. But she will slow down as the fight goes on. And she is 43 years old at this point. You look at her last fight, that was versus Macy Chiasson. She got hurt on the feet, upstairs and downstairs. She was controlled at times in the clinch on the cage. She was reversed on the ground, and Chiasson got on top at the end of round 2 and the end of round 3. And she did have some controlling moments in the clinch. She was able to land some takedowns, but again, Chiasson was able to beat her in a lot of areas. With Miesha Tate, it's very difficult to know how to analyze this fight, obviously. The last time she fought was November 2016, a whole different era of MMA, a whole different era of the UFC. That was versus Raquel Pennington. She is on a 2-fight losing streak at the time, of course, after that Raquel Pennington fight. The most we can really think about is, who was Miesha Tate at this point? She was a very basic striker who was kind of improving at the time, didn't really have the best striking defense. We saw what Raquel Pennington was able to do to her. No head movement, very hittable, and she shows the damage really early. You know, face gets red, bloody, or whatever it may be. But we know Miesha Tate to be a really good grappler. We know Miesha Tate to be a really good wrestler. You know, she has really good really good takedowns in general, I should say. Good control on top, good positioning. Again, like I said, you know, in some ways, there really is no way to accurately analyze this fight. We don't know what Miesha Tate is going to look like 5 years later. But even though you would think the return of a fighter coming in at 34 years old after 5-year layoff, you might not feel too favorable about that. But she's taking on a 44-year-old. Marion Reneau is 44. I said 43 earlier on in my analysis. I meant to say 44. And I just can't bet on a 44-year-old in general in this MMA game. So I'm not going to do that. She is taking on, like I said, a 34-year-old who claims to be better than she's ever been in Miesha Tate. And we don't know what we're going to see from Miesha Tate. So in some ways, I'm rolling the dice on the potential improvements that we'll see from her. In other ways, I'm banking on the 34-year-old fighter to beat the 44-year-old fighter. So I'm going to go with Miesha Tate. I think she gets the W. I think the UFC gave her a winnable fight, and I think she's going to get the job done.
Yeah, this is hard because obviously 5 years is 5 years, right? But you got to think that Miesha Tate cherry picked this opponent here, Marion Reneau. Out of all the fighters in the top 15, she cherry picked her, and she should get this done. She should be able to utilize her wrestling, get this to the mat, and utilize that grappling advantage that she has here. But I'm not sold here. I'm not sold. I understand that Marion Reneau is 44, is it? But she looks good, man. She doesn't look like a 44-year-old, right? So I'm going to go with the underdog here. I'm going to go with Marion Reneau. I just think that 5 years is too long to know what she's going to be about. I looked at her Instagram. She looked pretty good. She looked really good, actually. Looked strong. She's definitely putting on some muscle. But 5 years is way too long here. Even if she looks good in the first round, I think after she gets hit a couple times, 5 years is that's too long of a time to remember how that feels. And Marion Reneau, like you said, she has good movement around the ring, and if she keeps us on the feet, I think she's the better striker. Even if Tate gets a takedown, if she doesn't finish her in the first round, I'm not sure she can do that for 3 rounds, being out 5 years. So I'm going to go with the old lady. I'm going to go with Marion Reneau. I think she's a bit more well-rounded at this point. Her age is a concern. That's why I'm not betting this fight at all. I would suggest you do the same. Just enjoy the match, because you can't put a bet on a fight. You haven't seen the fighter fight in 5 years. You just basically you're hoping and you're guessing, right? So I would avoid betting this fight. It doesn't make sense to do that. But Marion Reneau would be my pick for the challenge.
Not mad at that at all. And again, yeah, there's just way too many variables to even know which way this fight is going to go. So not mad at that at all. Why don't we go then to our main event, Islam Makhachev taking on Thiago Moisés. How do you feel about this one?
Islam Makhachev.
That's it. Simple, right? To break.
Let me go into a bit more, just so people understand. Because so in this fight we got Thiago Moisés. He does have a bit of striking. He's not that great. He's a jiu-jitsu fighter, so he can definitely get a submission. But I think Islam has the better striking in this fight, and I think Islam has better grappling, because that wrestling, he's going to be in the dominant positions, and him and his training partners, they know how to avoid submissions. Khabib made a living in people's guards, so Islam's going to be able to avoid all the submissions here. And I think that, will he get a finish? It might be hard to submit Thiago Moisés. So I think this may go 5 rounds, but Islam's my pick.
Yeah, and I'll keep it short on my end as well. You know, Islam is going to be my pick as well. Look at Thiago Moisés. He was a plus 200 underdog in his last fight. That was versus an unranked Alexander Hernandez. He's now taking on Islam Makhachev, somebody who is a legitimate title contender, somebody who nobody really wants to fight. So you do have to tip your hat to Thiago Moisés. But I mean, again, I think he's just going to be outclassed here. There is really no reason to go against Makhachev in this fight outside of the fact that it still is a fight. Otherwise, again, better stand-up, Makhachev, better wrestling, Makhachev, and to your point, making a living being in these guys' guards, you know, not really being threatened by the potential grappling advantages that Moisés could have in this one. So Islam Makhachev all day, he's going to be my pick. Let's take it to Vegas in that case. And let's talk about an underdog pick considering the entire card. Which underdog pick or two are you potentially looking at?
I'm going to roll. For the main card, I'm going to roll with Marion Reneau.
Not mad at that. So Marion Reneau plus 125. Pretty decent there. If I'm considering an underdog on my end, I am going to be looking at, again, this is almost by default based on his last performance. I am betting against Rodolfo Vieira, Dustin Stoltzfus at plus 200. In terms of favorite picks, what are you looking at?
All right, favorite picks of the night. I like. I'm gonna throw Islam Makhachev on there because I think that's free, right? So I like Islam Makhachev. I'm gonna go with Mateusz Gamrot. Even though Stevens has that power, I just feel I'm gonna go with the better fighter here, and yeah, he should get this done. He should get this done. Remember, he's only lost one fight, and that one fight he lost was pretty close, right? So I'm gonna go with Amanda Lemos. Rodrigo Nascimento. I'll leave it at that. 4.
So we have 4 fights.
Listen, I know you might be hating because of the odds, but again, like last week I hit. I'm just trying to hit. I'm trying to win money for everyone. So I feel like those are the picks that we got to roll with.
I agree with that. And again, like I said, here at Boxing MMA Picks, we are about the win. We are not about the odds. We are about the win. So we truly, or you truly feel like this is a potential winning ticket. 4 fights plus 164, $100 will return 264. And for our bigger bettors, $250 will return 662. And I mean, again, we warned the people, this is one of those cards that you want to be very careful about. There's not as much money available on this card in comparison to the Conor McGregor card, for example. If I'm looking at a favorite pick or two in terms of some parlay action, I am going to add Rodrigo Nascimento to that. I know I did not add him to the prelim video, but I am going to add him in this one. I'm going to go with Francisco Figueiredo again. And like you said, got to go with the free money in Islam Makhachev. And again, this is not the most stellar payout, but again, I'm more concerned about the win than I am the payout itself. So $100 will return $195. And for our bigger bettors, $250 will return $487. So almost a double up there from that perspective. So on that note, we are going to sign off. As usual, help us out with all of that algorithmic stuff. We would definitely appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. Press the thumbs up on this video. Go ahead and watch our prelim video as well if you have not done that already. And make sure you participate in the comments. You know, we want to hear from you, which underdog picks you're considering, which parlays you're considering. And we're always more than happy to give you some additional analysis on your specific picks. Make that happen in the comments. Now, as usual, he goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. This has been the main card prediction video for UFC Vegas 31, aka UFC Fight Night, Makhachev versus Moisés. Let's get this money.
Let's do it.